Alright, time for another draftphysics.com video presentation. Debatephysics.com also. But as is always demonstrated, these clowns, assholes, jerks, fucktards can't manage physics debate. And so there's another fucking bullshit example. So some moron leaves a comment, and the moron who runs the channel hearts it. Okay, and there's what it says. So this is what the wife beater, right, who runs the channel. We all know he's a wife beater, right? I mean, he talks like one, he looks like one. Must be. you know. Anyway, you have the patience of a saint. I don't think it will change draft fake anxiety disorder's mind. So you can't do that. I'm just letting you know. Okay, glowing 571. You've opened yourself up to punitive damages. See, because this is really personal stuff. You can't really talk about somebody who's disabled, okay, has a disability, or a medical condition. You can't do that without opening yourself up to a lawsuit. Okay, so I'm just letting you know that that's what you've done. You violated the law, and you violated law that has been strengthened to discourage exactly what you just did. I don't have to defend my life to you in any way. My personal life is my personal life, and you're not allowed to make slanderous, shitty accusations, okay, direct accusations regarding how I've conducted my life, unless you have some evidence. You have to have good reason to believe. Now, what's going to be your excuse when the judge asks you, what was your good reason to believe? I hate him. There, that's what you're going to have to say. I hate him. So I made up shit and I said it. Well, guess what? You're going to lose. Okay, they're going to say, well, yeah, you deserve to be punished because we have to discourage people doing this shit. This isn't what you're supposed to do with your free speech, is to lie about other people. That's not what free speech is about. Free speech is to protect truth. It's not to protect lies. That's not the intent. That's not what the law says. We need to protect liars, so we need to protect it as a First Amendment. You have a right to lie about other people. That's not what the First Amendment says, fuckhead. So, just giving you fair notice, all right, that you've violated my rights. You violated your obligations as a citizen. No matter what country almost you live in, these rights exist, and you have violated them. These laws exist, and you have violated them. Just a fact. And you will be prosecuted when I can afford to prosecute you. That's simple. So that's what you've subjected yourself to. And again, I'm not gonna, what am I supposed to do? I'm not gonna reward you for this bullshit. You heart a pile of shit comment like this? Doesn't say a goddamn fucking thing? Is there a physics argument somewhere in there? No. And you heart it? And what am I supposed to think of you, you fucking piece of shit? I'm supposed to interact with you? When you would invade my private life, you fucking piece of shit? Alright, so that's all that needs to be said. So I'll play his video in the background, and, he's really stupid. And so he really doesn't get the underlying principle at all. So he has redone this again. So now he's changed the lever to a lever made out of wood that frankly can't do any better. It weighs just as much. So he hasn't accomplished anything in terms of really changing anything. It's a tiny bit longer, not much longer. And all he's really done here is move the heavy mass in, which is exactly what I suggested. But he hasn't done it enough. So he has, in this video, conceded that he lied about what I said, okay, in the sense that I clearly did state that, yes, half the mass, and it weighs half as much as half the mass, and that's a problem. The lever, the more it weighs, the more percentage of the energy it consumes, and incidentally, that means that you have to calculate your distances based on when you're creating a half the weight. The total weight has to be half the total weight, meaning the total weight of how much energy the lever is going to take. So in a sense, you have to reduce the weight of the lever by reducing how fast it moves. You can't make the lever any lighter. So all you can do is say, well, how do I make it seem lighter, is to make it consume less energy. And it moves less the further out you put something. So all you had to do was this experiment a little bit better, all right? And frankly, you would have got even more dramatic outcome. So the outcome of it is, frankly, my calculations, their prediction would be 6.5. What he ended up with is 7.7 out of 10. So it's pretty far from his maximum. So he's over. He's got too much energy for his theory to be right, and there's way too little for my theory to be right. No. But we're stuck somewhere, not exactly in the middle, but we're stuck with answers that are fit neither theory. That's the truth of it. So we're stuck in a place where you have to explain, well, what are the other variables? And one of the obvious variables when you see the second mass launched is that one of them is spinning a lot, turning. Now obviously when those two ropes have to twist around each other, that's going to consume quite a bit of energy. The rotation of the object is obviously always, the only place it gets the rotation from is rotating from the energy that should be moving it forward, and it's now wasting the energy turning it sideways, rotating. So obviously the heavy mass isn't rotating, so it's not a problem. It's wobbling a little, but not rotating. I mean, the strings aren't crossing each other, which is even more work, more energy lost. He's also kind of, all right, not quite on the center of mass of either object, but it's even worse in the lighter mass case. So you can sort of see here that the lighter mass is a little bit higher on the stick, which is not conducive to you getting all the energy into it. But you'll see clearly it's quite a difference. Well, that was a failure. Okay, so the second one works, and then he has to readjust it. But obviously he got a lot of spin, had to unspin it. It spun so much. So that one's much better. Then they fail, and then they fail, and then he has to readjust it. He moves it in a half an inch. So yeah, he's getting lots of twisting, lots of motion in directions he doesn't want. Partly because he's catching it on this thing, which he hasn't noticed is sticking out. This little piece of plastic, I don't know what it was for. Some other experiment, no doubt. But clearly that was the problem. It was crashing into this thing. So anyway, he's moved it in further now, which is exactly the opposite of what you wanted to be able to do, which is to move it out further, not in further. So it's not exactly ideal. So look at the tiny portion of this video that's the actual experiment. 30 seconds worth of actual usable experiments. You can see it almost goes off the board, almost, in a couple of cases. Now it is erratic, so this is another thing you notice, is that the outcomes aren't consistent. See, that was a failure. So that's a problem. I mean, if you can't get pretty consistent outcomes, that's indicating there's some error in what you're doing. Somehow it's not turning out the same way, and it really should be the same each time. Pretty damn close to the same, right? You're supposed to be eliminating variables, not emphasizing variables. So you're sort of failed to accomplish that task. But you can see quite a lot of spinning. It spins, quite a lot. Now, see, that one didn't go hardly anywhere. And he stops there, for whatever reason. So anyway, so he didn't really, I mean, it's nice that he's interested enough to do the videos. But yes, we're really not getting enough information to draw conclusions. And I don't even know what this is. This is a weird end he has here. I don't know what the tape is on this for. It almost looks like it's a dentable surface, which wouldn't make any sense. That's the stop he's using. Brozo did it the opposite way. He had a stop on the other end, where it stops it from going any further. But anyway, it's obviously a different experiment, and trying to get them both to go the same direction is the trick. So in a sense, you need a stop to do that, but the stop would also, you could argue, is consuming part of the energy then. But it shouldn't matter, I guess, because the lever's already in motion. So I'll go over some of those things that are parts of this conversation that should be agreed upon, I suppose, that you would think a reasonable interaction should include agreement on certain premises based on understanding what it is that you're trying to do. So, what we have learned, okay, is that the mass you put on here is this mass plus this mass. This is the total mass. So you have to, when you're going to say, I'm going to move something twice the distance and reduce the mass, the problem is you can't reduce this mass, this portion. So you obviously have to go further out, okay, to find a position where this is actually half, okay. So you have to go further than half these masses. So just because this says 1, it isn't really, and this says 2, and this is 2 units of distance by the idealized equation, right? The equation's dealing with an ideal. It's saying if you have an ideal lever, one that weighs nothing and never bends. Well, we don't have ideal levers. So the truth is that you have to compensate for the fact that you are using the force is being divided between moving the lever and moving the object. So you have to move this object far enough away so the lever consumes less energy. See, the lever moves less for the same velocity the further out I put this one. So if I just put a 1 mass on it and I put the 1 mass here, the lever has to move faster to give it, say, 10 velocity. If I just want to give this a 10 velocity, if I put it here, the lever has to move really fast to create a 10. It has to move very slowly to create a 10 here. So that's how I reduce the mass of the lever, is by reducing its velocity. So I have to reduce the velocity of the lever enough to make this 1/2 the total mass. The mass of the object plus the lever, I have to make it less than. I have to make it half of this total. And the only way I can do that is I have to extend the difference. I have to increase this twice the distance, and I have to make it plus plus. And because this is, the lever is 1/3 the mass of the total mass of the object, right? This weighs 1 and this weighs 1/2. Okay, so it's 1.5. All right. So so I have to realize that I have to change the mass of this 1/3 by a lot to make this half mass now half of this total weight. So the total weight has to be changed by only changing this. So you have to go beyond the 2 distance an amount enough where you turn the lever into weighing half of what it weighed here. Alright, so he did it with something like, let's say this was 4 inches, he made it 3 inches, essentially. So, and something that simple, right, just moving it an inch, you can figure this out, right? If I change the 3 into a 2, right, the half number would have been 6 here. Well, if I change that by 2, now it's 3 times further. So he only moved it like 2 plus, and maybe you need to go all the way to the 3. Maybe you need to go on 9 inches, and you have to go going less than 8. So, so the expectation is clearly from the previous experiment he did, is that you can expect to get more energy into the object by placing it further on the lever. So it doesn't matter. The 2 mass, I put the 2 mass here, it only goes this far. I put the 2 mass here, it goes this far. If I put the 2 mass here, it goes this far. It keeps increasing how far it goes, how much energy it gets, because I'm decreasing how much the lever takes. So, what this also tells us, okay, is that this was already a fact before we even discovered this part. I did mention this in previous videos, by the way. I couldn't draw this better. Whatever. I gotta find a better camera angle, I guess. So I'll work on that too. So there's just no place to move the camera where it just doesn't get in my way, frankly. Anyway, see, this is filling the board a lot more than it looks in this image. But anyway, so this half of the lever you don't need. You don't need a counterbalance. You're not balancing it in gravity here. This is superfluous. So one way to make the lever more efficient is to just get rid of all this extra lever that you're moving. Now you've made the lever essentially lighter, okay, and you can make it longer. So you can build your catapult, okay, by just having this as the spring. Put the spring close here and have a long lever this way, because it's total mass of the lever. There's no counterbalancing effect. The spring doesn't care whether there's lever here or not. It's not going to make any difference, except it just makes the lever heavier. But it's not going to change the fact that if you put a 1 mass here or a 2 mass here, that you have certain expectations. Now again, the expectations should be that, oh yeah, it's going to move pretty fast no matter where I put it, because all I'm really doing is taking the force here and trying to put it in here. That's all I'm really doing, and I'm trying to say the lever should take as little as possible. So I'm really just putting the object on the spring and shooting it. And as we know from springs, yeah, it's a little complicated, okay, to get springs to do either theory. Okay, they give back more momentum, okay, than the 1.3, the 3 that they should give, and they give less than the 2, you know, for the half mass. So we know springs aren't perfectly efficient by themselves. But anyway, this experiment should be able to eliminate that. So another test you can do. So you can build your lever differently. You don't have to have the fulcrum in the center. All right, that's a fact we should be able to agree on. This extra lever can't make any difference. It doesn't help or hurt the experiment at all. It means absolutely nothing. All right, back. All right, so so the other experiment you can do is just to put both the objects on the lever and see how far they go. You know, theoretically, okay, now you have a true test because both of the masses will be included. So you'll have the mass of the lever, the mass of M1, okay, and the mass of M2, and that'll be the total mass that you're moving. And that is what's happening. You're moving mass. The weight part, okay, is what happens in gravity, but there's no weight here. There's just mass, and you're moving it. So you're going to apply a pressure, a force. You're going to apply a weight to create an object that then has weight because it's now moving. And so that'll tell you, all right, how efficiently. First, you'll see if this doesn't go twice the velocity, then you know something's really wrong with your lever, because technically it has to, right? If this one's going 1 velocity here, and this one has to at the same time go twice the velocity, so you know that somehow the lever's going twice as fast, but it's not getting into the object. So this will show whether the twisting shit or all the other crap makes any difference. So first do this experiment with them both, and then leave everything the same, don't change anything, okay, and then do the individual objects. But what you can tell from this whole thing is that there's going to be a maximum velocity you're likely to get, right? So no matter where I put it on the lever, we know we can't just make an infinite amount of energy. I can't put the 2 mass here and the 2 mass here and expect the same result. And as I go further out, again, the lever moves slower, but it also bends more. So that's the liability. It starts bending. So there is a point where it's going to stop going faster. It's going to be the efficiency of how light you've made the lever is going to be destroyed by how much the lever dysfunctions or bends or absorbs the energy because of how fast it's being obligated to move at this end. And so that'll be a point. And so you can pretty much expect that you're going to get a curved line where it goes faster and faster and faster, and then it won't go any faster. and then it'll start going slower. And both objects are going to have that curved line. And the argument I'll make is that when you do that experiment, the curved line for the one mass object will in fact achieve the 4 times the distance it needs. Just like it will achieve it here. If I just put both objects on the lever, you'll see it either work or not work. So first do this. That'll tell you whether your contact points are wrong, your center of gravity's off, the string's twisting too much, or some other detail is fucked. And then once you know those details aren't important, then you can just put the mass on and see how fast your maximum, what's the maximum velocity you can give the 2 mass, what's the maximum velocity you can give the 1 mass. And when you get those maximum velocity curves, I'm going to say the 1 mass is going to be 4 times the 2 mass. Alright. Is that enough? Yeah, enough details. But yeah, there's all science to all this stuff. The other thing to consider is your fulcrum. So I mean, maybe I'll talk about the fulcrum a little bit. So in my experience, playing with the experiment, I found that you don't need the fulcrum to do much. Okay, it's only in play for a tiny period of time. And so what I actually noticed is that all I need was for a fulcrum was any kind of pivot, because the forces are all in the same direction. The resistance, the inertia of the mass is pushing down in a sense. It's resisting. You have to give the energy to it. It takes time, blah, blah, blah. That's called resistance. And this force, you know, the spring is obviously pushing this way. Okay, you're obligating the spring to apply a force. To be technically correct, right? You're bending the spring out, and then it's going to pull back down. So I'm just trying to, we're stretching this spring, okay? We're expanding the spring, and then it's going to contract. The contraction will be in this direction. All right, so you only have 2 forces in this direction. So all the fulcrum is feeling is this. It's not feeling anything going the opposite way. All right, so theoretically, you don't need it to do much except just create a pivot here. So what I found worked best, okay, was I put a little piece of steel wire in front of the rigid thing. So I even minimized how big the contact point was. It was a little, 1/16 of an inch or less piece of wire. And that's what the lever pivoted on. And it wasn't connected in any other way than connected by the fact that it has tension constantly on it. So I cut a little tiny groove in the lever so it wouldn't pop off, and so it stayed in the same position. And frankly, the whole experiment takes place and the lever stays where it's supposed to, and it's not until everything is already done, this has already left the building, that the lever flies off the pivot. And that's just saying it has velocity and it moves. So what? I don't lose anything. The important job, the place when the action is happening, the fulcrum is working. So in a sense, you want to try to make your fulcrum, the rubbing bits, the parts that are creating any kind of friction, as small as possible, because then they can do the less theft. The more you spread the fulcrum out, the more surface area you involve in the pivot, the more heat you're likely to create. So if you want to minimize how much transfer of energy, you minimize the contact point just with electricity. You want to minimize how much electricity gets between 2 things. You minimize the amount of contact, and you reduce how much wattage can get through. And that's essentially what you're doing here, is you want to try to reduce how much wattage can be absorbed by the fulcrum. So I'm not saying it's critically important. Maybe it's not going to make enough of a difference. Maybe this is a variable that doesn't matter very much because it's a tiny percentage. But I'm just saying that's my experience, is that I could see the difference as I played with the fulcrum. The smaller I made it, the more energy I did get. So it did in fact have an effect. in my case. So that just could mean that my original fulcrum sucked. Maybe it won't change anything in your case. But I do think theoretically there's sound logic to understanding you want to minimize the contact point. You want the fulcrum to have as little matter on matter as possible. All right. And to be as rigid and as hard as possible. Undentable, unyielding, unmending, unbending, any kind of, you want it to be as like crystals in a watch. That's why there's crystals in a watch. It's because they're really hard and they don't allow any abrasion. All right. So I'll see if there's anything else to say, but we are learning stuff about how this stuff works, and I still haven't thought of a more ideal experiment, because they all have these liabilities, all these little variables that just change from an ideal circumstance into an unideal circumstance. And let's understand, it's all to their advantage, right? We're trying to test something where the more energy you lose from the system, the better it is for their theory. And mine requires you not to lose any losses, make it look more and more like they're right. So I'm at a huge disadvantage, because for my theory to be shown to be true, I need to be as close to the idealization as possible, because frankly there's no source of extra energy. So anything that takes energy from the system is going to look like it's to their advantage. So it should be understood I am at a huge disadvantage in all these experiments, because mine needs the idealization to work, because there's no energy to give away, there's no momentum to give away. And anytime you give it away, because they have the squared term on the velocity, it's to their advantage. All right. So we'll pause, but I think that's about it. I just thought of one thing to make a clarification of. So when the two mass, if the lever weighs 1/2 of the one mass, okay, then we could say, let's give that a 1. And we'll say that this mass weighs 2, okay, because the lever's half as much as this weighs. All right, and that means the heavy mass weighs 4. So you can sort of understand that when this lighter object is on the lever, you have a total of 3. When the heavy object is on the lever, you have a total of 5. So just understand that's the difference the spring is seeing. The spring isn't seeing the one mass as a 2 mass. It's seeing it, okay, as actually a 1 mass, okay. That's technically the force bit part. It can't change how much it actually does weigh. So the actual amount of mass being moved is only 3 here, and it's 5 here. So you have to understand that difference. This isn't 5. 3 is not half of 5. So that's where the problem is. And the only place you can fix that is to lighten the lever, which is only 1/3 of this thing's weight. So to lighten it by a whole integer, a whole, to make this 3 into a 5, you have to do you have to take like 3/4 of this mass, okay, it has to be eliminated. So you're eliminating 3/4 of the mass of the lever, and to eliminate 3/4 of the mass of the lever, that is to make it accelerate less, make its velocity lower, it has to be 3/4 lower. Okay, so you have to go out much further than just going halfway. I mean, there's probably equations for this, but I doubt there is, frankly, because physics hasn't paid any attention to this stuff. But I mean, just the fact that you're talking about, you can only change the 1/3. You can only fix the problem with this 1/3 part. The 2/3 is out of reach. So all you can deal with is the 1/3 part. That's the only thing you can fix. And so you have to fix a substantial amount of it. More than half of it has to go away for you to make the mass, the total mass of the lever plus the object, to make those two values the same requires you to take away an awful lot of the lever's effect on the experiment by reducing how fast it actually has to move. All right. So I think these are all important facts, okay, regarding how catapults work, and that our simple idealization of how they work is pretty much hard to put into any physical reality. The idealization requires the lever to be massless or substantially lighter than the objects we're throwing, and that's hard to do. Alright, so I think that's enough, so we'll call it a video and such. This has been, okay, debatephysics.com video presentation. Lots of subjects to debate.